The massive ship hung in the darkness of space like a metal moon, its hull stretching for miles in every direction. Commander Vexthal stood before the main viewing screen, his 6 arms crossed behind his back as he watched the small blue planet rotating slowly below. Earth looked so peaceful from this distance, with its white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. It was hard to believe that billions of primitive creatures lived down there, completely unaware that their world was being watched. "Status report," Vexthal commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge of the Dominion's fist. The ship had been observing Earth for 3 full cycles now, hidden behind advanced cloaking technology that made it invisible to the planet's crude. "Detection systems," Lieutenant Kexner stepped forward, his claws clicking against the metal deck. "Sir, we have completed our analysis of the species they call humans. Our conclusion remains unchanged." "This world is perfect for training ground Sigma-7, Vexthal nodded slowly. The Zalarian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for 1,000 years, conquering world after world with methodical precision, but conquest was not enough. Young Zalarian warriors needed practice, and practice required live targets. That was where training grounds came in. "Show me their weapons again," Vexthal ordered. The main screen flickered, displaying images captured by their surveillance drones. Human soldiers moved across a desert landscape, carrying primitive projectile weapons. The weapons used controlled explosions to propel small pieces of metal at high speed. It was crude but effective technology, though laughably primitive compared to Zalarian energy weapons. "They call this an assault rifle," Kexner explained. "It fires metal projectiles using chemical propulsion. Range is limited to approximately 2,000 meters. The projectiles cannot penetrate even basic energy shields." Vexthal watched as the human soldiers practiced their formations. They moved with discipline and purpose, but their equipment was so primitive it might as well have been sticks and stones. "What about their vehicles?" "Equally primitive, sir. They use fossil fuels for propulsion. Their fastest aircraft cannot exceed 3 times the speed of sound. Their ground vehicles are slow and heavily armored, suggesting they expect to take damage rather than avoid it." The screen showed images of human tanks rolling across training fields. The vehicles were massive and loud, belching smoke as they moved. They looked more like moving fortresses than proper military vehicles. Zalarian hover tanks could fly circles around these lumbering beasts while raining death from above. "Their population centers?" Vexthal asked. "Concentrated and poorly defended. They have no orbital defenses, no energy shields, no proper military installations. Their largest cities are completely open to aerial attack. We estimate that a single cohort could pacify an entire continent within days." Vexthal smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was exactly what they had been looking for. The humans were advanced enough to provide interesting combat scenarios, but primitive enough that young Zalarian warriors could defeat them without serious risk. It was perfect. Far below on the planet's surface, Captain Jake Morrison had no idea that alien eyes were watching his every move. He stood in the Nevada desert watching his drop troopers practice their insertion techniques. The men and women of the 82nd Airborne Division were some of the best soldiers on Earth, and Morrison pushed them hard to make sure they stayed that way. "Move it, move it, move it!" Sergeant Lisa Carter shouted as fresh recruits stumbled out of the transport helicopter. The rotor wash kicked up clouds of sand that stung their eyes and filled their mouths with grit. "This is a combat zone, not a Sunday picnic. Keep your heads down and your spacing tight." Morrison watched with approval as his soldiers spread out across the landing zone. They moved with the fluid precision that came from years of training and multiple deployments. These men and women had fought in deserts, jungles, mountains, and cities. They had faced enemies armed with everything from improvised bombs to advanced missiles. They were survivors. "Time," Morrison called out, checking his watch. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Better than last time, but still not good enough. In real combat, you get one chance to get it right. The soldiers nodded, breathing hard in the desert heat. They had all seen combat before. They knew that the difference between life and death often came down to seconds. Speed, accuracy, and teamwork were not just military virtues but survival skills. "Sir," Carter approached Morrison, her rifle held at the ready. "The new recruits are improving, but they still need work on their urban warfare drills." Morrison nodded. Urban warfare was one of the most challenging forms of combat. Fighting in cities meant dealing with civilians, narrow spaces, and enemies who could be hiding anywhere. It required split-second decisions and perfect coordination between team members. "Schedule extra sessions," Morrison ordered. "I want them ready for anything." Above them, the Zalarian observers recorded everything. They saw the human soldiers as slow and clumsy, their weapons primitive and their tactics predictable. What they failed to understand was that these soldiers had been shaped by generations of warfare. Every human alive was descended from warriors who had survived countless battles. Their instincts had been honed by millennia of conflict. Back on the Dominion's Fist, Admiral Kreanax reviewed the final reports with satisfaction. The old Zalarian leader had overseen dozens of training ground operations, and Earth looked like one of the easiest yet. "The indigenous population shows typical, primitive behavior patterns," he read from the tactical assessment. "They organize into competing tribal groups that fight among themselves. Their weapons are crude but adequate for training purposes. Resistance is expected to be minimal." Kreanax approved the invasion plan with barely a glance. "Deploy training. Cohorts 7 through 12. Let the Cubs earn their first battle honors against these primitives. We will return in 6 months to collect our victorious warriors." The Admiral had no way of knowing that he had just made the biggest mistake in Zalarian military history. Earth was not just another primitive world filled with easy targets. It was a planet where warfare had been refined into an art form, where every soldier was a professional warrior, and where the concept of surrender was almost unknown. The Zalarians were about to learn that there was a big difference between primitive technology and primitive tactics. Humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing, and they were very, very good at it. As the Zalarian fleet prepared for the invasion, human soldiers continued their training in bases around the world. They practiced with weapons that would seem crude to alien eyes but were deadly in experienced hands. They drilled formations that had been tested in countless battles. They maintained equipment that had been designed by engineers who understood that reliability was more important than advanced technology. The stage was set for a conflict that would change the galaxy forever. The Zalarians expected to find helpless prey. Instead, they were about to encounter apex predators who had been waiting their entire evolutionary history for worthy opponents. The hunt was about to begin, and the Zalarians had no idea that they were about to become the hunted. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Nevada desert when the sky suddenly changed. What had been clear blue moments before now flickered with strange lights, and then massive shapes began to appear. The Zalarian ships decloaked one by one, their metal hulls gleaming in the dawnlight like deadly jewels. Each vessel was the size of a city block, hovering silently above the desert floor. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez was drinking her second cup of coffee at Peterson Air Force Base when the first reports started flooding in. The radar operator's voice cracked with disbelief as he spoke into his headset. "Ma'am, we have multiple contacts appearing over every major city on the planet. They're big, really big, and they just appeared out of nowhere." Rodriguez sat down her coffee and moved to the main display screen. The satellite feed showed the same impossible sight repeated across the globe. Massive alien ships hung in the sky over New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, and dozens of other cities. They made no aggressive moves, but their presence was message enough. "Get me the president," Rodriguez ordered, "and scramble everything we have. I want every fighter in the air in 10 minutes. President Martinez's emergency broadcast reached every corner of the globe within minutes. His voice was steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "My fellow Americans and citizens of Earth, we are not alone. We are under attack, but we will not surrender. We will not yield. We will fight with everything we have." The Zalorian training cohorts began their descent 2 hours after the initial appearance. Young war leader Thalver commanded the first wave, his hunting pack consisting of 50 warriors fresh from the academy. They wore ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness, carried energy weapons set to stun rather than kill, and expected to be back aboard their ships within hours. Thalver's transport craft settled onto the White House lawn with barely a whisper. The young alien warrior stepped out confidently, his weapon held casually at his side. His orders were simple: capture the human leadership, demonstrate Zalarian superiority, and begin the process of pacification. It was supposed to be easy. The first bullet caught Thalver in the chest before he had taken 3 steps. The impact knocked him backward, his ceremonial armor cracking under the force of the high-velocity round. Staff Sergeant Kevin Hayes had been watching the landing zone through his scope for 30 minutes, waiting for the perfect shot. When the alien's foot touched the ground, Hayes squeezed the trigger. "Contact," Hayes whispered into his radio. "Hostiles are downrange and they bleed red just like us." The Zalarian ceremonial armor had been designed to stop energy weapons and look impressive during victory parades. It offered no protection against a 50 caliber round traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Thalver collapsed, his green blood mixing with the carefully maintained White House grass. The rest of his hunting pack reacted with confusion rather than tactical awareness. They had expected frightened primitives, not disciplined soldiers firing from concealed positions. Their energy weapons, calibrated for stunning rather than killing, proved inadequate against enemies who had no intention of being captured alive. Human soldiers emerged from positions that had been prepared for months. Every major government building, military installation, and strategic location had been turned into a fortress. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that understood terrain, used cover effectively, and fought with a coordination that spoke of years of experience. Captain Morrison received his orders at 8 in the morning. He gathered his drop troopers in the briefing room, their faces grim but determined. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have aliens thinking Earth is their playground. Intelligence says they're using non-lethal weapons, probably planning to take prisoners. We're going to show them what human hospitality looks like." The 82nd Airborne Division had been deployed to major cities across the country. Morrison's unit was assigned to Los Angeles, where 3 alien ships had taken position over the downtown area. The plan was simple: insert via helicopter, locate the alien landing zones, and eliminate any hostile forces. Rules of engagement. "Are weapons free?" Morrison continued. "These things invaded our planet. They don't get a second chance to surrender." The helicopter ride to downtown Los Angeles gave Morrison a clear view of the alien ships. They were beautiful in their own way, all smooth curves and gleaming metal. They looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a battlefield. That was about to change. The Zalarians had chosen their landing zones with typical military precision, open areas that provided good visibility and multiple exit routes. What they had not considered was that humans had been fighting in urban environments for centuries. Every street corner could hide a sniper, every building could conceal a machine gun nest, and every alley could become a killing field. Sergeant Carter's squad took position on the roof of a downtown office building. They had a clear view of the alien landing zone 6 blocks away. Through her binoculars, she could see the alien warriors moving in perfect formation, their weapons at the ready. They moved like they were on parade rather than in combat. "They're clustered together," Carter reported to Morrison. "No scouts, no overwatch, no consideration for cover. They're moving like they expect us to run away." Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. "Light them up." The ambush began with a single sniper shot that dropped the lead alien warrior. Then the machine guns opened up, followed by rifle fire from a dozen different positions. The aliens had superior technology, but they were fighting an enemy that understood tactics, terrain, and timing. The Zalarian energy weapons could punch through concrete and steel, but they were useless against enemies they could not see. The human soldiers used every advantage they could find. They fired from windows, rooftops, and basement levels. They used the city itself as a weapon, turning every intersection into a crossfire zone. War leader Thalvar S. replacement, a veteran named Kexthal, tried to rally his scattered forces. He had fought on a dozen worlds, but never against an enemy like this. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, striking from concealment and then disappearing before the aliens could respond. Request immediate reinforcements, Kexthal transmitted to the fleet. The primitives are not behaving according to tactical projections. The response came back within minutes. Negative. This is a training exercise. Adapt and overcome. But adaptation required understanding the enemy, and the Zalarians were learning that they understood nothing about humans. These were not frightened primitives cowering before superior technology. These were professional warriors who had spent their entire lives preparing for war. The battle for Los Angeles lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the alien landing zones were silent except for the crackling of burning vehicles. The Zalarian training cohort had been wiped out to the last warrior, their superior weapons and armor no match for human tactics and determination. Similar reports flooded in from around the globe. The aliens had expected easy victories but found themselves facing an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to panic, and refused to die quietly. Every landing zone became a battlefield, every city became a fortress, and every human soldier became a reminder that technology alone does not win wars. Commander Vexthal received the reports with growing disbelief. His training cohorts were being systematically destroyed by primitives using chemical weapons and metal projectiles. It was impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. The humans were winning. The distress signals reached the Zalarian Fleet Command 12 hours after the first landings began. Admiral Krianax stared at the tactical display in growing horror as red markers appeared across the holographic globe representing Earth. Each marker showed a landing zone where his training cohorts had been completely destroyed. "This is impossible," Krianax growled, his claws scraping against the command console. "They are using primitive weapons, chemical explosives, metal projectiles. How are they defeating energy shields and combat armor?" Commander Vexthal stood beside him, equally bewildered. "Sir, we have intercepted human communications. They are adapting faster than our tactical computers predicted. They are studying our weapons and finding weaknesses." The answer came from the captured battlefield recordings. Human soldiers were not just fighting with their own weapons. They were taking Zalarian equipment from fallen warriors and figuring out how to use it within hours. More disturbing, they were finding ways to combine their primitive technology with alien science. Marine. Colonel Dan Phillips coordinated the defense of Los Angeles from his command post in the City Hall basement. His technical teams had been working around the clock to understand the alien technology they had captured. The results were both encouraging and terrifying. "Colonel, we figured out how their shields work," reported Lieutenant Sarah Wilson, the lead engineer. "They operate on a specific frequency band. If we can disrupt that frequency, the shields collapse completely." Phillips nodded grimly. "What do we need to do it?" "Ironically, sir, our old equipment works better than their new stuff. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, not kinetic projectiles. A regular rifle round goes right through them. If you hit the right spot." The human adaptation was happening at a pace that shocked even the humans themselves. Soldiers who had never seen advanced technology were learning to operate alien weapons in hours. Engineers who had worked with conventional electronics were reverse engineering energy systems that should have taken years to understand. Air Force Captain Maria Santos climbed into her F-35 Lightning II fighter jet, her mind focused on the mission. Ahead, intelligence had identified the alien fighter patterns, and they were surprisingly predictable. The aliens flew in perfect formations, followed precise flight paths, and seemed to expect their enemies to do the same. "Control, this is Falcon 1, Santos radioed as she launched from the runway. "I have visual on bogies at Angels 20, beginning attack run." The alien fighters were sleek and fast, their energy weapons capable of vaporizing a human aircraft with a single hit. But they flew like they were in a parade, maintaining perfect spacing and predictable maneuvers. Santos had been flying combat missions for 8 years, and she knew how to use unpredictability as a weapon. She dove toward the alien formation. Her missile systems locked onto the lead fighter. The aliens responded exactly as their training had taught them, breaking into a standard evasive pattern. Santos had studied that pattern for 6 hours and knew exactly where each fighter would be. Fox 2, she called out, launching her missiles. The first alien fighter exploded in a ball of fire, its pilot never understanding that human tactics were based on chaos rather than order. The Xylarians began escalating their response, deploying heavier weapons and more experienced warriors. What they discovered was that humans escalated faster and more creatively. Every alien weapon that appeared on the battlefield was captured, studied, and improved within days. Sergeant Carter's drop troopers had become something entirely new. They still wore human uniforms and carried human weapons, but they had added alien technology to their equipment. Energy shields protected them from return fire, while modified alien sensors let them see through walls and detect enemies at long range. Movement in the building ahead, Carter reported to her squad. Thermal signatures show 12 hostiles, probably setting up an ambush. The aliens had no way of knowing that the humans were using their own technology against them. Every piece of equipment they lost made their enemies stronger, while every tactical pattern they revealed was analyzed and countered. Captain Morrison's unit had evolved into something the Xylarians had never encountered. His soldiers moved through the urban battlefield like ghosts, using captured alien equipment to enhance their natural abilities. They fought with the experience of veterans combined with technology that gave them superhuman capabilities. These aren't the same primitives we analyzed, Morrison told his assembled squad leaders. We're becoming something new, something they can't predict or counter. The psychological impact on the Xylarian forces was devastating. Young warriors who had expected easy victories found themselves facing enemies who seemed to know their every move. The humans anticipated their tactics, countered their weapons, and turned their own technology against them. War leader Nexvar led the third wave of reinforcements into downtown Chicago, whose troops were equipped with heavier armor and more powerful weapons, but they were also more cautious. The reports from the earlier landings had been clear. The humans were far more dangerous than anyone had predicted. Stay in formation, Nexvar ordered his warriors. Watch for snipers. These primitives are using unconventional tactics. The human response came not from snipers but from below. The city's sewer system had been turned into a network of tunnels that allowed human soldiers to move unseen beneath the streets. They emerged from manholes and storm drains, attacking the alien formation from directions that no military manual had ever considered. The Xylarians found themselves fighting an enemy that used everything as a weapon. Human soldiers threw improvised explosives made from household chemicals, used construction equipment as armored vehicles, and turned city infrastructure into defensive positions. Every building became a fortress, every street became a trap, and every human civilian became a potential combatant. Commander Vexthal watched his forces being systematically destroyed from his command ship. The tactical displays showed a planet-wide disaster. His training cohorts were not just being defeated. They were being outfought by enemies who should have been helpless. Request immediate evacuation of all ground forces, Vexthal transmitted to Fleet Command. The primitives have weapons we do not understand. The response came back within minutes. Negative. Stand and fight. Victory or death. But victory was no longer possible. The humans had adapted to Xylarian tactics faster than the Xylarians could adapt to human unpredictability. Worse, they were learning to use alien technology better than the aliens themselves. The battle for Earth had become a masterclass in human adaptability. Every challenge the aliens presented was met with innovation. Every weapon they deployed was countered with ingenuity, and every tactical advantage they possessed was turned against them. The Xylarians had come to Earth expecting to find a training ground where their young warriors could learn the basics of conquest. Instead, they had found a planet full of teachers who were about to give them the most expensive education in galactic history. The lesson was simple: never underestimate a species that has spent its entire existence perfecting the art of war. The main Zellerian battle fleet arrived expecting to find a conquered world decorated with victory banners and filled with captured prisoners. Instead, Admiral Kreanax found himself staring at a planet that had weaponized everything from kitchen knives to nuclear submarines. The orbital sensors showed a world united in a way that defied all military logic. "This is impossible," Kreanax muttered as he reviewed the tactical displays. "How are these primitives coordinating global resistance? They were fighting each other just weeks ago." General Patricia Webb coordinated the planetary defense from her command center buried 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. Her screen showed something that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Former enemies were sharing weapons, technology, trading tactical information, and fighting side by side against the common threat. "Russian submarines are sharing sonar data with American destroyers," reported her intelligence officer. "Chinese engineers are working with European scientists to reverse engineer alien technology. Every captured piece of equipment is being analyzed by teams from 12 different countries." Webb nodded with satisfaction. "They wanted to use us as a training ground. Let's give them an education they'll never forget." The space battle that followed broke every rule of engagement the Zellerians had ever learned. Human fighters, hastily retrofitted with captured alien technology, swarmed toward the massive ships like angry insects. They did not engage in honorable single combat or follow predictable attack patterns. They hunted in coordinated packs, using swarm tactics to overwhelm alien defenses. Captain Morrison's drop troopers had been transformed into something that no military academy had ever imagined. They wore armor that combined human engineering with alien materials, carried weapons that fired both kinetic rounds and energy blasts, and moved with the confidence of soldiers who had learned to turn any situation to their advantage. "Listen up," Morrison told his assembled troops as they prepared for their most ambitious mission yet. "Intelligence has identified the alien flagship. We're going to board it, fight our way to the command center, and show these invaders what happens when you underestimate the human race." The boarding operation began with captured alien transport craft approaching the Dominion's fist. The Zellerian sensors registered the vessels as friendly, their computer systems fooled by human engineers who had learned to speak the language of alien technology. By the time the defenders realized their mistake, human soldiers were already inside their ship. The corridors of the Zellerian flagship were designed for beings twice the size of humans, with ceilings that stretched far overhead, and passages wide enough for heavy equipment. The aliens had built their ship like a palace, with decorative panels and artistic flourishes that spoke of a culture more concerned with appearance than practicality. Sergeant Carter led her squad through the gleaming corridors, her modified sensors showing the locations of alien defenders ahead. The Zellerians had excellent technology, but they had built their ship assuming they would always be the attackers. Their internal defenses were designed to repel boarding parties using conventional tactics. "Contact front," Carter whispered into her radio as her squad encountered the first group of alien defenders. The Zellerians opened fire with energy weapons that could melt through steel, but the humans were no longer fighting with steel. Their captured armor deflected the energy blasts, while their return fire punched through alien defensive systems with devastating effect. The battle for the Dominion's fist lasted 18 hours and became a textbook example of human adaptability. The aliens fought with desperate courage, but they were facing an enemy that had learned to fight in every environment imaginable. Human soldiers who had trained in jungle warfare adapted their skills to the ship's hydroponics bays. Veterans of urban combat turned the ship's corridors into killing fields. Desert fighters used the ship's vast cargo holds as open battlegrounds. Commander Vexthal found himself fighting a running battle through his own ship, retreating from section to section as human forces advanced with relentless efficiency. His warriors were brave and well-trained, but they were fighting an enemy that seemed to know their ship better than they did. "How are they moving so quickly?" Vexthal demanded as another position fell to human assault. "They should be lost in our corridors," The answer came from his technical officer who had been monitoring human communications. "Sir, they are using our own navigation systems against us? They have learned to read our computer displays and access our internal sensors." The humans had done more than capture alien equipment. They had learned to think like aliens, to use alien logic, and to turn alien advantages into human weapons. Every system the Zalarians relied on became a tool for their enemies. Captain Morrison's assault team reached the ship's reactor core after fighting through 12 levels of determined resistance. The massive chamber hummed with energy, its alien technology generating power on a scale that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. But energy was energy, and humans had been dealing with dangerous power sources for centuries. 30 seconds. Carter announced as she placed the final explosive charge. The device was a masterpiece of human engineering, combining alien energy cells with human demolition expertise to create something that neither species could have built alone. The explosion that followed was visible from Earth's surface. A brief new star that marked the end of Zalarian technological superiority. The Dominion's fist, pride of the Zalarian fleet and symbol of their power, became a cloud of expanding debris and a lesson that would echo across the galaxy, the surviving Zalarian. Ships fled the Sol system carrying news that would shake the foundations of their empire. The species they had dismissed as primitive had not only defeated their ground forces, but had destroyed their most powerful warship. Worse, they had done it using Zalarian technology improved with human ingenuity. Emperor Zulaneth received the reports in his throne room on the Zalarian homeworld. The ancient ruler had overseen the conquest of 100 worlds, but he had never heard of anything like this. An entire battle fleet defeated by primitives using chemical weapons and metal projectiles. They were supposed to be training targets, the Emperor whispered, his voice heavy with disbelief. How did they defeat our finest warriors? Admiral Krianax stood before the throne, his once proud uniform stained with the evidence of defeat. They are not primitives, Your Majesty. They are apex predators disguised as prey. We mistook their crude technology for weakness, but we failed to understand that they had perfected the one science that truly matters. Which science is that? The Emperor demanded. War, Your Majesty. They have spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill, and they are very, very good at it. The news spread across the Zalarian Empire like wildfire. The species that had been marked for easy conquest had turned their would-be conquerors into refugees. The humans had not just won a battle, they had demonstrated that technological superiority meant nothing against tactical genius and unbreakable will. On Earth, the captured alien technology was being reverse-engineered at a pace that astounded even human scientists. Dr. Richard Kane led research teams that were already developing faster-than-light communication, advanced materials science, and weapon systems that combined the best of both civilizations. They wanted to use us as a training ground, Kane told the assembled world leaders during their emergency meeting. Instead, they've given us the keys to the galaxy. The irony was not lost on anyone. The Zalarians had come to Earth seeking easy victories for their young warriors. Instead, they had created the galaxy's newest and most formidable military power. The surviving Zalarian ships limped away from Earth carrying news that would reshape the galaxy forever. Emperor Zulaneth paced his throne room like a caged predator, reading reports that seemed to come from some nightmare rather than reality. His empire had ruled 1,000 worlds for 1,000 years, but now trembled before the actions of a single planet. 47 ships lost, the Emperor read aloud, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. 12,000 warriors dead or captured. The Dominion's fist destroyed. Our most advanced technology in the hands of primitives who should not even understand how to operate it. The reports painted a picture of complete military disaster. The humans had not just defeated the Zalarian forces. They had captured enough technology to reverse engineer faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and defensive systems that had taken the Zalarian Empire centuries to develop. Worse, early intelligence suggested the humans were improving on the captured designs on Earth. The transformation was happening at breathtaking speed, Dr. Richard Kane, stood in his laboratory surrounded by devices that had been science fiction just months earlier. Human engineers worked alongside captured Zalarian equipment, their minds making connections that even the original designers had not considered. "The power efficiency is incredible," Kane reported to the Joint Chiefs of Staff during their weekly briefing. "We've increased the energy output of their reactor designs by 30% just by applying human engineering principles. Their technology is advanced, but it's also conservative. They never pushed the boundaries of what was possible." President Martinez nodded as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The global unity that had emerged during the invasion was holding strong, with former rivals now working together on projects that would have been impossible before the crisis. "What's our timeline for the new ships?" "The first prototype will launch within 6 months," Kane replied. "We're calling it the USS Revenge. It will carry a crew of volunteers, each one a veteran of the Zalarian War. Their mission is simple: find the Zalarian Empire's other training grounds and liberate them." Captain Morrison stood before his transformed soldiers in the Nevada desert, where their story had begun. The 82nd Airborne Division had evolved into something that would have been unrecognizable just a year earlier. They wore armor that combined human durability with alien technology, carried weapons that could punch through battleship hulls, and moved with the confidence of warriors who had faced the galaxy's apex predators and won. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison announced to his assembled troops, "we've received new orders. Command wants us to take the fight to them. We're going to visit every world the Zalarians have marked as a training ground and show them what happens when you try to use innocent people for target practice." Sergeant Carter checked her new equipment with professional appreciation. The rifle in her hands could fire both kinetic rounds and energy blasts, switching between modes with a thought. Her armor could stop anything short of a direct hit from a starship weapon, and her helmet display showed tactical information that would have seemed like magic to soldiers from the previous generation. "Sir, are we talking about invading their empire?" Carter asked, though her grin suggested she already knew the answer. "That's exactly what we're talking about, Sergeant. They called us primitives. They called our world a training ground. Time to show them what happens when you underestimate the human race." The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than the Zalarian Empire could contain it. Species that had been marked for conquest as training grounds began to organize their own resistance movements. Worlds that had already fallen to Zalarian rule started planning rebellions. The empire that had seemed invincible just months earlier suddenly found itself fighting fires on a dozen fronts. The USS Revenge launched on a Tuesday morning, its engines burning with energies that human scientists had only dreamed of before. The invasion? The ship was a masterpiece of combined technology using Zalarian power systems and human ingenuity to create something that neither species could have built alone. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded a crew of 300 volunteers, each one chosen for their experience in the war against the Zalarians. "Course laid in for the Kepler system," reported the navigation officer. "Intelligence indicates the Zalarians have been using the fourth planet as training ground Gamma 12 for the past 5 years. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Time to pay them a visit." The first liberated world fell to human forces within hours. The Zalarian garrison had been expecting to deal with primitive locals armed with crude weapons, not battle-hardened human soldiers equipped with advanced technology. The young Zalarian warriors who had been sent to earn their first battle honors instead found themselves facing an enemy that fought with the accumulated experience of centuries of warfare. The pattern repeated across the galaxy as human ships appeared at one training ground after another. Each victory brought new allies as liberated species joined the growing coalition against Zalarian rule. The empire that had controlled 1,000 worlds began to crumble as its foundation of fear was replaced by hope. Emperor Zul'Aneth received the surrender requests in his throne room, each one representing another nail in the coffin of his empire. 47 different species wanted to join what they were calling the Human Coalition. Former subjects were openly rebelling. Entire sectors were declaring independence. How did this happen? The Emperor demanded of his remaining advisors. How did a single primitive world destroy everything we built? Admiral Kreanax, one of the few commanders to survive the initial invasion, stepped forward. We underestimated them, Your Majesty. We saw their primitive weapons and assumed they were weak. We failed to understand that they had spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for war. The final battle came sooner than anyone expected. The human fleet, now numbering over 200 ships, appeared in the Zalarian home system without warning. The Empire's remaining forces scrambled to defend their homeworld, but they were facing an enemy that had learned all their tactics and improved upon them. Admiral Morrison, promoted from his position as a ground commander, stood on the bridge of the USS Victory and watched as the Zalarian fleet moved to intercept them. The alien ships were beautiful and deadly, their crews brave and well-trained, but they were fighting an enemy that had turned warfare into an art form. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he broadcast to his fleet. Remember why we're here. These beings thought our world was a playground for their children. They thought our people were toys to be broken for entertainment. Show them the price of that mistake. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete surrender of the Zalarian Empire. The species that had ruled through fear and intimidation found themselves facing an enemy that fought for something far more powerful, the protection of the innocent and the promise that no world would ever again be used as a training ground for conquest. 1 year later, the galaxy was a very different place. The human coalition had grown to include over 300 species, all united under the simple principle that might did not make right. Former predator species watched nervously as humans established themselves not as conquerors but as protectors of the weak. Captain Morrison, now commanding the USS Defiance, stood on his bridge watching as the last Zalarian stronghold surrendered. His soldiers had become legends across the galaxy, not because they were the strongest or fastest, but because they never gave up and never left anyone behind. Sir, Sergeant Carter reported from her position as his executive officer, we're receiving surrender offers from 47 different species. They want protection from other predator empires. Morrison nodded, unsurprised. Let them know we're not interested in conquest. We're interested in peace. But if anyone else wants to use inhabited worlds as training grounds, they'll have to go through us first. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. Never underestimate a species that has spent its entire existence preparing for war, especially when that species values peace but is exceptionally good at fighting when forced to defend itself and others.